Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending which part of the world you're in. I'm here today from the Kantara team, and I'm talking with Josefa Olja from 1Kosmos, who have been a member of Kantara Initiative for some years now, I think that's correct, but actually went through the assurance review program at the mid part of 2021. Interestingly, they've just completed their first annual review. So I've asked Josefa to come and have a chat with us today about the value that they have seen from that program and how they are using that to inform the decisions about how they'll develop their identity proofing services in the future. So firstly, welcome, Josefa, and thank you very much for making time to talk to us. Tell us a bit about you first. Where do you come from? What's your identity background, and how have you ended up at 1Kosmos?
Absolutely, Karen. Thank you. Thanks for giving us the opportunity and myself, to come on this. So I have been in identity and access management for a little over 15 years. And I would say, just like similar to all my peers in this particular industry, identity chose me rather than the other way around. But being part of startups and large organizations as well. In fact, this was my third startup in identity and access, right? And previous two had successful exits, being part of Sun and Oracle as well. Again, managing different roles, managing the identity portfolio in those companies. My role here at 1Kosmos is I am the Chief Operating Officer, right? So handle all the different parts of the business at 1Kosmos.
Great. Thanks. So you've been in the industry for 15 years and more. What are the biggest changes that you've seen, do you think, across your time, and where is that taking us?
I think there are several different changes, but the most prominent one that I can recall, that I can point my finger to, is around digital identity. I think digital identity in the last decade has evolved so much, where we have seen that the need for a user, right, especially with the move to applications in the cloud, applications that are provided over SaaS, digital identity has become a very significant part of any kind of a user experience, user journey.
Yeah.
And along with digital identity, what comes is how do you trust that particular identity? What are the security and privacy elements that go with it as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the last couple of years, the pandemic has heightened that need for digital services and people's, kind of requirement to have that greater trust in the applications that they're using. Do you think that we've seen a shift from it being led by technology to users having more say, or more awareness, at least, of what their data can be used for? What's your view there? Is it tech push, or is it user pull?
I think you've nailed that. I think even in tech, just to highlight, I'd say security aspect of it, right? I think if you rewind 15 years back, security was front and center, right? And user experience didn't matter at the end, right? And anything that a user wanted, was not even in that conversation. I think now, as we've evolved, with technology evolving, right, identity products, security products evolving, security has become an integral part of any function feature that comes out. It is required that anything, as product vendors that we're developing, security is managed, right? And it has gone through all the due diligence that goes with it.
A basic requirement almost, yeah.
Right. But I think the important point, Karen, that you highlighted is, with the ability of a user to be in control of that information, right? Especially with recent hacks, events where users are able to see their own information out in the public, so frequently, they want to, and especially information that they had no idea that they were, providing, to different service providers. User managing that particular data, user controlling that particular information, that conversation has, started to take shape. Right? And we're seeing, definitions of Web 3.0 coming in picture, where again, a user would be more in the center of any of these experiences that we define, digital experiences that we define.
Yeah, I think that's right. And And I think also the fact that we now have standards in this area and that those standards are being applied in a much more broader base across different sectors as well also points to the fact that the industry is maturing, isn't it? It's growing up, it's becoming standardized, we're looking at interoperability. Where do you sit on all of that? Because you've obviously been through the assurance program at Kantara. Presumably there were drivers within your organization that you wanted to be compliant with the NIST standards, but where do you see it going next? What is that future looking like?
It's a great question, because if you look at identity and that applies to the world of standards, I think it is still a bit siloed, right? Where you see the world of authentication, you have different standards around how applications need to interoperate, how they need to federate with each other, with SAML, and OAuth and other standards that go with that. As well as with the new advent of passwordless, right, and FIDO, which is essentially enabling that push of authentication and how a user authenticates without any kind of credential. But then there's a separate silo of identity assurance, right, with the whole journey of when a user is onboarded, and we believe that the standards need to essentially come together more, right?
Okay.
But as far as any kind of a digital identity journey, if you look at the digital identity journey of a user, the first step is you need to make sure that the person that is behind any kind of a transaction, right? If I'm authenticating the user, if the user is involved in any transaction that happens on my particular service, I need to know who Zephyrs is Zephyr. Right, not HO1234.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So from that standpoint, right, Kantara and the identity assurance, framework that has been put together, right, is extremely important. Okay.
And how was the experience of going through the assurance review and actually getting your Trustmark last year? How was that for you? You can be honest with us. It's a pretty rigorous process. I know there's a lot of time and effort goes into it from both the company's behalf and also the assessors and a Kantara team behind the scenes. So what was your learning from it, and how are you using your Trustmark now that you're actually well into, an accredited company?
Yeah, one important thing is that yes, you highlighted it was rigorous, right? It was, and it is a good thing, to do that, especially because when you look at identity assurance, right, that is not an easy task. Right?
Yeah. And it's not just technical, isn't it? It's not just about technology.
It's not at all. No. It's all about how you manage that particular information. Yeah. You have the right controls, right? Are you making your user community, who you're doing the identity assurance for, are you making them aware of what you're going to be doing what you will be doing with this particular information, and are you making that information front and center for them, right? So that experience, right, the first time then we went through that particular certification, right, was very, very important for us, right? Because that we've designed a solution, keeping privacy, by design principles in mind, but it was an experience that made us bring that information out in front of the users, and we use that on a daily basis, right?
Okay. So it really made you concentrate on that focus and make sure you put the user right in the heart of it.
Like some of the guidelines, some of the policies, that we, put together as part of the whole certification process. Today, if a user is signing up, right, we make those available to them. Right?
Okay, cool.
So yes, it was very, very enriching.
And how have you managed to ensure that all of the team, everybody at 1Kosmos, kind of understands what this means and the Trustmark that you actually have, which is a pretty big thing, really, that stamp of approval, that you conform to some of the most rigorous standards out there. How have you used that with your team?
Yeah, so first, from an information security standpoint, that is more of a heartbeat function, right? Yeah. And whatever we're doing, that permeates to all the different departments within our company, including our support, our engineering teams, our customer success teams, to make them aware of what it means, right? What are we doing with the user's information, and then communicating it back to the customers as well.
Okay. Right? Yeah.
I think this particular mark is also important because it validates how we're doing the identity assurance, right? And we're seeing the market and customers, also looking for vendors who have this particular trust mark.
Yeah.
Right? So, from that standpoint, we are using that information as well, right, to reach out.
So do you use it in brand building and actually sort of say it's part of your credentials?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Right.
Cool. That's great. So you've had a year as an accredited member or accredited company in the space. What's year two looking like? What are you focusing on now, and what have you learned through the annual review that you want to then kind of lift up further?
We would love to, so number one, the annual review, again, going through it, right, just make sure that we have all of those pieces in place. But we see this relationship that we have with Kantara to be much more long-term, right? It's going to be a little bit more of a longer answer, because when I talked about any kind of identity proofing, and verification journeys, this is so new in the market, right? And Kantara's in front and center in defining this particular standard, right? I recently learned that Kantara is putting a framework together in UK as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
I was just going to say you're aware of the UK developments as well, yeah.
Right, and we are very excited about that, right? And I'm sure because when we look at any kind of an identity proofing standards, there are so many today, but very limited when it comes to any kind of an assurance program. So we are excited about that, and hopefully it's not just US and UK, right? It expands to all the different countries and regions as well. But the last point I'll make over here is we want this partnership to be, well, I said, digital identity, and digital identity becoming more front and center, right? How can we, bring more technology components, right, into any kind of an assurance framework or standard that can be built, right? There are elements, right, that we are using today, which may become obsolete tomorrow. Right? Are we going to be on top of that as well, right, in any kind of a future attestation framework?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also looking at the cross-sector approach as well. You may not work in certain sectors today, but you may want to in 2 or 3 years' time, or as markets change. And I think it's looking at ways that the trust marks can help support that interoperability across sector, across territories, and make it easier for you guys to do enhanced business, really. That's
Absolutely.
certainly a big part of our goal and our mission. So I suppose really just to wrap up then, what would your advice and guidance be to other companies just setting out to either go through the initial program of getting assurance, or not even thinking about accreditation at this point in time? What would your advice be?
Any company that is essentially looking at any components of digital identity, it's extremely important today, right, to have an assurance of the type of identity that you're managing. Number one, right? Like you mentioned, it's not just important, in providing that assurance to your end customers, but industry is demanding that now as well, right? So if you're, going to be looking for any kind of a customer, they're essentially going to be looking for and saying, are you at an IAL level 2 or an AAL level, right, 2 or 3 as well. But in addition to that, right, if you are signing up for this, right, keep your customers and your end users in mind, right? And this particular initiative is going to help you with that, right? And like you mentioned, it's not just about the technology and getting that ready. That's the easy part, right? But how do you make sure that, because when you're managing a user's identity, you're proofing them, you're managing that particular information, how you're managing that data, and how you're communicating to your end users becomes extremely important as well. So if they are embarking on this particular journey, they have to be prepared for that. And
I would only, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask for feedback as well on our own sort of processes, having been through it, and I'm sure lots of learnings for us too. Is there any feedback you can give us that we can take so we can keep improving the program?
I think a little bit more automation would help, right? Just more if today, as technologies are evolving, some of the components, right, that we are managing for the users may not be a written policy, which is there. It's more of part of a process that we are encapsulating in our technology as well. Right? I think those are the elements that can be absorbed in better, right?
Right.
Because
Makes
as any
sense.
kind of a technology provider like us or any of them down the line, we are looking to remove friction from the user, but not compromising on the security or the privacy aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And are you seeing increased demand for compliance with NIST from potential clients and leads that you're talking to out in the market?
100%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you'd asked me the same question, maybe 3 to 4 years back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a very, very small community that, was aware of this, right? But, the NIST standard is in US, right? The golden standard when it comes to any kind of identity assurance. And, in Kantara is the flag bearer of making sure that any company who's saying that they're complying with NIST, right? Then here's your stamp that goes with that.
And it's actually
right?
the
So
Trustmark.
We've had inbound requests, right, coming to us, right, where essentially customers, potential customers who are essentially looking at and saying that if you have that particular trust mark, let's talk because we're looking for companies maybe who have that.
Yeah, it's certainly the sense that that's the direction the industry is moving in. And as you say, with our UK operations now, we're taking that same approach over there and talking to UK companies that also want to be involved and people like yourself who want to work in both markets and work across. I think that's one of the advantages that we can bring to actually support businesses like you want to work in multiple markets. So
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time. I will close off the interview at this point, and then hopefully we'll pick up our chat following on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.